What's going on, guys? My name is Renegade. Today we're here for Class Comparisons Episode 5. Today we're going to be taking a look at Legion Doomknight versus Legion Paladin for soloing. I know I went over Legion Doomknight last week, but I had quite a few suggestions for this one. They're both Legion classes, so it's a pretty interesting one, I guess. We're going to be comparing them for soloing, so that means that we'll be comparing them based on how fast they can solo a boss and how well they can keep their health steady and everything like that. That's pretty much what makes a good soloing class, in my opinion. The speed at which you can solo a boss and the stability at which you can keep your health. That's pretty much it. But yeah, before we get into the video though, if you guys could leave either any suggestions in the comment section down below for classes you want to see compared in future episodes. This is a weekly series, so I will be taking your guys' suggestions from this episode and using them in the next episode of this. So make sure you leave a purpose you want to see them compared for as well. For example, today's episode is going to be Legion Doomknight versus Legion Paladin for soloing. Just remember that either soloing or farming or support or whatever, just leave the purpose. Now, while you're down there, if you guys leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, that'd be awesome. But other than that, let's get into the video. Alright, so we'll first go over Legion Doomknight and what makes it a good soloing class and what makes it a not so good soloing class. So Legion Doomknight, I feel as though its main strength is with its heal ability. Compared to other classes, it really does have a strong heal ability. It's called Soul Siphon, and what it essentially does, it says that it deals damage and then heals you for a portion of that damage. I believe that's what it says in the description of the ability. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I don't think it does do that. I think it just heals around like 800 sort of thing. It's somewhere around that sort of area. It's a bit rough. I've measured it several times now, and it's been varied. I've seen it heal as low as about 500, but then I've seen it heal upwards of 1k before. So it really is a strong healing ability. Its cooldown is very short as well, so that makes it a spammable heal. It doesn't consume much mana either. I believe the cooldown is 6 seconds and it consumes 25 mana. So the mana consumption is actually fairly high, but it's really nothing to be concerned about, especially with its other abilities. Its other abilities really do crit quite often, and when they do crit, they gain you back a lot of mana. So the mana isn't really an issue for this class at all. Speaking of its other abilities, its first ability is called Touch of Doom, and what that essentially does is it'll buff things such as your damage. It also debuffs your opponent to cause them to do less damage. This stacks as well, and so you can get a pretty significant increase on your damage output, and you can decrease their damage output by quite a bit. Your last two abilities are essentially your damage abilities. Well, Legion Dark Blast, that's one of your damage abilities. It's got a short cooldown, so it's going to be used quite a bit when soloing, and it really can rather crit quite high. So I've seen this crit upwards of 5k before, so it really does crit quite high. And your last ability, Imminent Doom, what it does is it also applies as DOT along with pretty massive damage. It also prevents your opponent from healing, so it really does help you in bosses where the boss will start healing or something like that, although that's usually in like massive boss fights or something like that, or like end of saga boss fights, you know what I mean, like those kind of bosses where they've got special effects and stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much Legion Doomknight in a nutshell there. As I said, its mana regeneration isn't much of a problem. There aren't really too many issues that I could think off the top of my head for this one. As I said last week, Legion Doomknight, when you're looking at it objectively just on its own, it really doesn't have that many weaknesses, but you might compare it to a class and find like this class might have a more superior damage. For example, if you're like Chrono Dragon Knight versus Legion Doomknight, well, Legion Doomknight obviously has lower damage, but that's not really a bad thing, you know what I mean? For soloing, Legion Doomknight really doesn't have many weaknesses, if any at all. So we'll talk about Legion Paladin now, and then we'll talk about which one is better. Alright, so we'll talk about Legion Paladin now. Legion Paladin is one of those classes that has weaknesses and strengths for each individual ability, so I'll talk about each ability for its strengths and then each ability for its weaknesses. So the first ability, what it does is it applies a 25% buff to your damage. That's pretty good, I guess. It has a 5-second cooldown as well, and the damage buff has a 6-second, it lasts for 6 seconds, so you can pretty much have an infinite loop of damage buff to yourself, pretty much, so it's really good. Your second ability is a heal, and it heals 2 friendly targets as well, so that's not beneficial for soloing whatsoever, but still, it's a heal. It crits about 3.2k, which is awesome. It consumes 30 mana with an 8-second cooldown. The 30 mana thing is, it's a fairly high amount of mana, but the 8-second cooldown thing means that you can be constantly getting that health back that you've taken. The damage you've taken in 8 seconds, you can just gain it back with the heal. Generally, you will heal more than the damage you take, but it depends on the boss fight. Your third ability is called Shadowlight Spear, and it deals a lot of damage. It'll crit around 6k, and if you're fighting an undead monster, that is, I think, doubled, although I'm not entirely sure. And then your last ability is a mana regeneration ability. It has a 12-second cooldown, so you can be constantly applying it pretty much. The effects, I believe, last around 8 seconds, I'd say. So yeah, you can pretty much have a constant supply of extra mana coming in. It's almost constant with that 12-second or that 4-second difference. You're basically only having 4 seconds of no extra mana coming in. Yeah, that makes it seem like a pretty strong class, but it's really not. Its weaknesses come in several forms. Its first ability, it applies 25% damage buff, right? But it also applies a 10% buff to your enemy. It applies pretty much a 10% debuff to yourself, if that makes sense. What it does is it increases your damage taken by 10%. And that lasts just as long as your damage buff, so you have to be wary of applying that. Your heal, combined with all the extra damage you're taking, really might not be strong enough for a lot of boss fights. It's quite a weak heal, in my opinion. You just really have to think about, like, when you're going to use it, when you might have to use it. Just keep it ready, I guess. When you start losing a lot of health, you don't want to be wasting it. Its cooldown is not really short enough compared to the amount of damage you deal to yourself, if that makes sense. You'll find out what I mean by that in just a sec. Your Shadowlight Spear ability, the one that does a lot of damage, actually applies a DOT to yourself. It lasts 5 ticks, and it deals 150 damage per tick, so that's 750 damage total you'll deal to yourself using this ability. So yeah, it's pretty taxing. So that heal is really gonna be suffering from that. That heal really needs to be stronger, or they need to make that DOT to yourself lower. Your mana regeneration ability also applies a DOT to yourself of 50, and that lasts, I think, 5 ticks as well. So that's quite a bit of damage you'll be taking, especially if you're applying that mana regeneration constantly. So you really do deal quite a bit of damage to yourself. You deal quite a bit of damage to the enemy as well, but not fast enough. That Shadowlight Spear ability, the one that does a lot of damage, has a 12-second cooldown, so it's really not that much damage, especially if it's 2k crit, which is what it non-crits every 12 seconds. It's really not that much damage. So yeah, it has its strengths, has its weaknesses. Let's see how it compares to Legion Doomknight. So, for the two classes compared together, I think this is a pretty open and shut case, at least it is for me anyway. There really is nothing that Legion Paladin does better than Legion Doomknight, in my honest opinion. I really don't think that Legion Paladin has anything at all over Legion Doomknight. Maybe, just maybe, you might say, look, Legion Paladin does better crits. They can get higher crits, at least. But yeah, it essentially, what it'll do is it will, Legion Doomknight will have a higher overall damage output. If you time how much damage it'll do in, say, 30 seconds, Legion Doomknight will be superior because of its constant critting, as opposed to Legion Paladin's relatively slow crit rate, or their relatively slow damage output, if that makes sense, because of its, really, it only has one high damage ability, whereas Legion Doomknight has 2, and Legion Doomknight's high damage abilities have shorter cooldowns or whatever. So yeah, there really is nothing that Legion Paladin does better than Legion Doomknight. Legion Doomknight has a better heal, it has better mana regeneration, it has higher overall damage output. It just is better overall. You can probably see that by now. The Legion Doomknight is just a better soloing class overall. Perhaps Legion Paladin has an edge because it can heal 2 targets, I guess, but no, that doesn't affect the classes whatsoever in soloing. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the video, guys. I have crowned Legion Doomknight as the winner in the situation. I'm sure a lot of you guys would have said the same thing before the video even started. But other than that, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.